fishing news is sponsored by these fine partners.
They're here. That poltergeist-like announcement, not here. I'm actually off of Cape May County this week looking for sea bass, but everybody wants to know about the striped bass. Lo and behold, this is the second week in a row we're getting a report from Chuck Manny, striper hunter, but it's a little bit better than last week's report. I'm Jim Hutchinson, New Jersey, Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine. Chuck let me know this past Friday that he, Dave Glassberg, and Bobby Bowden were onto some really good fish, good stripers, somewhere off of Sandy Hook. It was so much for me that I just blew off everything else I had to do. Hit the high tide at Sandy Hook, offshore wind, saw bait in the wash, mullet, lo and behold, nada, nothing for me. Following up on those words, I kind of thought maybe that might be the first blast of fish inshore in along the beach, but it's bound to happen one of these days. I did bump into Anthony Pagano and his son Enzo Pagano. Enzo put the boots to this nice bluefish on a bucktail in the wash. But bluefish for most of the Jersey Shore is about all we've heard so far along the beachfront. Some kingfish, quite a few kingfish being weighed in the LBI Surf Fishing Classic, of course. I did see a post online this week of a 48-inch striper caught and released by Amir Strobel, someplace in South Jersey. Egg Harbor is where Emil's from, so someplace in Cape May County. Another good sign that we are in the midst of getting that run of stripers at some point. A few redfish, too. Red drum, especially Central and South Jersey in Cape May County in the mix. My buddy Bob Misak, he bumped into another father and son team, Barnegat Light, on Saturday up in the north end of LBI. Dan and Matt Combs with a keeper slot in that size limit where you can keep it, but the Combs boys, they let that fish go. Don't forget, if you are in that LBI Surf Fishing Classic, not just striped bass, not just bluefish, and not just a couple of red drum, you could get, there's 3 $100 gift prizes or cash prizes for the 3 biggest red drum caught in the 3 segments of that LBI Classic. And of course, like I mentioned, they added kingfish to the mix this year to make it a little bit more exciting this year for everybody. And so far, quite a few kingfish weighed in that contest. But now down here in Cape May County, I'm offshore a little bit, a few miles off the beach. Captain Bob Cope, the guys from Berkeley and Tackle Direct, we're giving it a shot with those black sea bass. Talk about that in a minute because we've got some good advice. We've been doing a little bit of slow pitch jigging. No clams on board today, all slow pitch. We'll talk about that just in a minute. But as far as those red drum down in Cape May County, along some of the jetty rocks, Caleb Kreider, he had a nice slot drum using green crab from one of the jetty rocks, from one of the jetties in Cape May County, according to the folks at Hands 2 Bait and Tackle. Now, I talked to Jeff from Hands 2 this week. He said mullet or sand crabs will also work for some of those reds. He said resident stripers are getting more active around those jetties as well. But he said toggen and sheepshead have been incredible, is what he said, advising some of the deeper water structure around some of those rocks, the bricks, the bridges. And of course, if you're putting green crab or you're putting Asian crab or fiddler crab down there, you're more than likely to also perhaps encounter a red drum. Now, as far as those jigging, the jigging with the crabs for some of those blackfish, Taryn Lee let me know she's making her own tog jigs at home right now, melted, painted, and epoxied in the garage. Nice little quarantine project, but it's done well for her. She had a 7-pounder last week, and if you're only going to get one blackfish until November 16th, you might as well make it worth your while. Good 7-pounder. Ryan Sullivan also let me know he was fishing with his family at their secret spot using greenies to score tog in the 3 to 4 pound class. So definitely right now, a good opportunity as those tog are still inshore along the sedges, the sod banks, the jetty rocks, the bulkheads, a certain canal that I know of in Northern Ocean County. It's also a good opportunity. Now, I did mention the fact that we are back in black sea bass as of last week. Some sketchy reports over the weekend. I say sketchy because, first of all, the weather wasn't great. We had a little bit of a heave on that opening day, but also some of these wrecks, an influx of some of the smaller fish. So the ticket is to get out there and about and mix it up a little bit and try to find some of those bigger fish. And like I said, one of the things that's been really cool, using them today with the folks from Berkeley and Tackle Direct here on Bob Cope's Full Ahead Sport Fishing. He won't tell me his number, so I can't share that with you, but using some of the slow pitch jigging is what has really kind of worked and get some bigger fish on board. I'll give you a couple of tips here with Chris Gatley.
So to me, jigging has evolved into so many things through the years. You had speed jigging where jigs were meant to go up through the water column. If you had 2, 3, 4 jigs, you could get a school of bait fish going up through the water column. You typically saw a lot of guys reeling really fast and pumping hard. Then you have the onset of slow pitch jigging. Now, to me in the Northeast, the slow pitch jigging I don't think is really well known to a lot of anglers. They use all the gear, but they use it for targeting fluke. So 90-95% of the slow pitch rods or reels meant for slow pitching is actually used for a different style of fishing or bottom fishing. But the true art or the true part of slow pitch that I think people really don't understand that can really help them is the actual rod and the reel and the gear, and how does it all work together. So here I'm going to kind of explain in the next couple of minutes how in my world it works. So for me, slow pitch jigging is definitely a specific style of rod. It is a specific type of reel, one that's comfortable, one that you can palm and hold. And it also requires or revolves around a center weighted jig. So a center weighted jig, obviously if you have a jig such as this one, your weight is center, or it's more based in the center, as opposed to like say a jig that's got all the weight on the back end. We don't want that jig for slow pitch. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to target inactive fish. That's really what slow pitch is about. It's about keeping that jig in the strike zone longer, getting a fluttering action in between your jigging motion or your style of jigging, and getting these jigs to pitch out to the side and flutter in front of the fish longer, as opposed to coming back and forth through speed jigging techniques like you see a lot of the tuna guys use. So to me, it's all about getting that rod tip to load and unload, load and unload, and it's pitching the jig out or skirting that jig out to the side. And if you can manipulate it enough, depending upon what size rod you have, you can actually get it to fall back down and flutter back down. And on inactive fish, that's really the key. Keep it in their house. Keep it right in their house. If something keeps bothering you on the dinner table, you swat it with a fly swatter. It's essentially the same thing. You don't want this thing come ripping through the water column. You want it to slowly pitch out to the side, flutter if you can get it to manipulate that way. And it revolves around the jigs, especially design jigs. It revolves around the action of the rods, and more importantly, the reels. I don't think the reels you need like a 46 or 52 or 22 inch retrieve. I'm a firm believer that you want a slow reel. That's just the way I like it, because to me, slow allows me to slow down. I want to keep that jig in the water column. I want to pitch it out to the side. I want to pitch it out to the side. And then when I do get that big fish on, I can just have power to get that fish up. Now today we were fishing sea bass. They were fairly aggressive. We were dropping lead heads down. We were doing all sorts of things with gold. But yeah, the slow pitch definitely got some big fish for us once we were able to get underneath those bluefish. So we did some things today, but really the whole key, and you'll see in some of the video that Jim took, it's all about getting this rod tip to load, unload, load, unload, load, unload. That to me is the key. Now you'll see some folks, and there's no right or wrong way, you'll see some folks that are diehard slow pitch guys that like to swing the rod tip up, or they reel and swing it up and they get it to come back down. That's fine if it works for you, do it. Other guys will short hop, so they'll short hop, so they're getting that tip to load and unload, load, unload, but it's a short hop. For me, it's easier to let the reel do the work. I'd rather turn that reel handle a quarter blast or a third of a blast of the full revolution. So it's a quick, 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 and that rod tip will pop, 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 pop. And today I took, maybe four bursts, hooked up every time. To me, that's what slow pitching is. I think it's underutilized in our area. You can use it for stripers. You can do it with tuna. You can do it, as you saw today, with sea bass. Give it a try. Okay, the goal today was to target sea bass with the new Penn Battalion slow pitch rods. They're new this year. They're actually due out today, believe it or not, of all days. But in order to do so, we needed to use center weighted jigs. We elected to go with the Nomad jigs. You have the Streaker and the Gypsy. We went with as light as we could to get to 115 feet of bottom, while making sure that it wasn't scoped out. So in order to do so, we were running 40 and 60 gram jigs, and in this case an 80 gram jig, and it allowed us to really get to the bottom fairly quickly and catch our sea bass. We described in the other video about getting the rod to manipulate to get to the bites. What did actually end up happening in one of the spots was we came across bluefish sitting on top of the sea bass. So some of these lighter jigs, we had a hard time getting down through the bluefish. So we caught a lot of bluefish. You can see the marks on it. I would say the number of fish came on the streaker, the bigger fish came on the gypsy, but in order to get through the bluefish, we resorted to 2-ounce lead weights and using gulp, 3-inch gulp. We wanted a slim, super slim profile, heavy weight to get through the system, and we pummeled the fish on that as well. So really though, to get into the slow pitch system, you want a center weighted. Again, we use Nomad today, the streaker or the gypsy, 40, 60, 80 grams, maybe a couple heaviers if you're gonna fish into some, heavier winds later this fall. So the Penn Battalion slow pitch rods are going to be available in spin and conventional. There's going to be 2 sizes of spin and there's going to be 4 sizes of conventional. We use the lightest today for the sea bass, the 100-gram jig weight class. That was super noodly, but it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of power to get fish over the rail. Then you have it in the conventional, you have a 250-gram weight class, a 350-gram weight class, and a 450-gram weight class. In the spinning, we only have 2 models.
Here's another tip. Everybody's going to the wrecks, right? The artificial reef sites along the Jersey coast, but sometimes you might want to get out and about to try to find your own piece of structure. I had an opportunity to sit down with Captain Bob, talk about some of his ideas.
You just got to look at the bottom and understand what you're looking at, trust your machine, try places. There's a lot of good places that aren't anywhere near any wrecks or any reef sites. I've found a lot of them over the years just by riding around and looking, paying attention to my machines all the time when I'm coming and going from tuna fishing. I found a lot of stuff that's been phenomenally good fishing, holds a lot of fish, but it's all about looking and finding.
So one thing you said before is, guys, just race out. It's like, I know I'm going over here. There's a benefit then to kind of sometimes slowing it down a bit.
Oh, absolutely. When you're running along at 40 knots, you're not seeing the bottom. I'm seeing at 17 knots. Would I love to be the guy at 40 knots at the end of the day? Absolutely. But it's paid me a lot of benefits by not going fast.
So have at it this week with those black sea bass. Of course, you've got the 12.5-inch size limit is in place right now, 10 fish. That's through the end of the month. And of course, then we switch over to 15 fish, goes up to 13 inches, and you'll get that through December 31st. Don't forget, on the freshwater side too, fall stocking is underway in the state of New Jersey. That was all the way through October 14th. If you needed another reason to make good use of that trout stamp that you and I both got this spring during the quarantine, the fall trout stocking is a heck of an opportunity to get out there in those lakes and streams in the state of New Jersey. Also Pennsylvania too. We got a report from my friend George, the Pocono Outdoors guy.
Well, hey, thanks, Jim. Fishing's been kind of weird the past few days. The weather hasn't been cooperating. We did have a bunch of rain, the remnants of the hurricane go through, and hopefully that'll bring up some of the lake streams and the rivers. The rivers have been down. Big D has been down quite a bit, so hopefully that'll bring up the water and improve the fishing there. We're not hearing a whole lot of stuff. It's really been quiet the past few weeks. Had a few folks checking in. Actually, some of the folks are either heading out to the saltwater, hitting that sea bass action, or even some guys are heading up to upstate New York, up in Toby's territory. Local guy Easton Schwam was out getting some of these king salmon up there on way upstate New York. So some good fishing there if you'd like to travel. But things back here actually been pretty quiet. I know there's some smallmouth being caught, some crappie, but nobody's really checking in with much. We have here James Sanfilippo checked in with a beautiful brown trout here he caught on the rivers there. So the river fishing is doing real well. Justin Lerner checked in with a beautiful brown trout and a couple of pike he got out there in Jersey over the Passaic. So the fishing out there isn't too bad either if you want to get out and try some of that. Also good for an Eric Goodstall, beautiful brown trout. The fishing's been great here if you like those streams. Hopefully the season will pick up. I haven't heard of many stripers being caught, maybe a few up in Wallen Pompack, but nothing terrific. I hope that picks up soon because this is prime time. I hope you guys get out and get on them. From Pennsylvania, I'm George, your Pocono Outdoors guy.
A little bumpy out here middle of the week, but I'll tell you what, we've got offshore winds in the forecast for the weekend ahead, and hopefully that cleans things up a little bit after that big heave we had to start the week. I always like the northwest couple of days of northwest because it seems to chill the waters off a little bit, blows that warmer surface water off, and we need those bait. We need those baits to start bumping out of the inlets, to start heading down. Put some bait at your feet, whether it's by beach or by boat. John Bosco tells me, let's run through the state, north to south. Real quick summary. John Bosco is up in the striped bass action. He said it's getting pretty hot and heavy, getting that way in the lower Hudson River. He put Walter McGee on one off Lady Liberty last week. A good bet. Bobby Matthews, Fisherman's Den in Belmar, said the Shark River area showing signs of life. He said the blackfish and sea bass, of course, that fishing is great, weather permitting. And of course, up in the northern part of the state, you also have the opportunity to get in on some of those porgies as well. Also, bluefish in good supply. We had a bunch of cocktails here mixing it up with us on the jigs today, but some of the boats up out of Shark River are getting some bigger bluefish up in the 15-pound class, and some good fish on many of the boats like the Last Lady here, Captain Ralph's boat. That offshore bite off of Central Jersey seems to continue when we can get a good weather window. That hasn't been very often of late. It never is when we get to this stage in the fall. And I'll tell you what, the weekend ahead from the Baltimore to Hudson doesn't look that promising either. But just keep your eye on the weather forecast when those windows arrive. You do have that yellowfin bite offshore. It's about time to get into some deep drop swordfish and maybe the overnight chunk as well. Meanwhile, from the back bays from Barnegat down through Great Bay, Little Bay, and into Atlantic and Cape May County, a good bet for some of those striper action in the back on the jigs, the bucktails, maybe Dragon Live Peanuts, Dragon Live Spot. Dave Scholl loves the Gulp Nemesis, putting on that on a jig head there. Of course, some of the top waters, the poppers around the outgoing tide along the creeks and creek mouths. And again, the sheep's head have been hungry in Cape May County in particular. Not sure how long this bite will continue, but that's a good opportunity. I know across the other side of Delaware, we're getting equally good reports from the sheep's head action there. Last week, I got an email from Rich Treadwell. He got in on some of those convict fish he's been taking with his wife Denise and buddy Don Smith. They've been working the outer wall in Delaware Bay. One of the things that Rich has told me is he's had like 22 so far this season. They're roughly between 6 and 10 pounds. He's using sand crabs out there at the outer wall in Delaware, so you might want to check in with the folks from Lewis Harbor if you want to get in on some of that action. I mentioned the redfish. We're just about that time we should start seeing some of those speckled trout, particularly down here in Cape May County, farther inshore, of course. But if you want some tips on that, pick up that October edition of the Fisherman magazine. Frank Rosinski has a great article on page 22 all about catching some of those speckled trout. I kidded with him before. Now that he's revealed some of the secrets to specks, he's currently in witness protection. Look for that 50-pound striper on the cover. That's Toby Lipinski, his first 50. If you're looking for that October edition of the Fisherman magazine, we got a full month worth of reading for you, and we're actually working real hard. I'm not right now. We're working real hard on that November edition. That'll be out in a couple of weeks. So this weekend, look for those stripers from the north. Find them in the back bay. Get out here and get in on this black sea bass action while it's hot, but we're going to have this continuing through the end of the year. Catch them up. We'll see you again next week right here at thefisherman.com.
Steigercraft boats built by people who fish our waters. Serious anglers choose Steigercraft for their 40 years of boat building experience right here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Visit steigercraft.com for a dealer near you.